presented in cooperation with Creative and Long Beach Comic-Con. We're running a little late, but you know, Filipino time, right? So, really quickly, who is Filipino here? Who has like Filipino family members? Right. Sure. Should be everybody, right? Anyway, so my name is Rodney Cahuno. I'm with Philam Creative. Philam Creative is a organization, small volunteer organization that helps promote Filipinos, Filipino Americans in media and in the arts. And we are so happy to see everyone here. We had the idea of putting together, because you know the creative field is so wide, and we wanted to also include comic book and animators and writers. So please welcome, I'm pretty sure everybody knows, Whilce Portacio. He's a writer, artist like X-Men, X Factor, creator of Wetworks, Non-Humans, etc., etc. And then we have Leo Partible. He is a writer in animation and also screenplays. He's also worked in the exec world, developing comics into film. And then to his right is Partible, his brother. Is the creator of Johnny Bravo, that was on the Cartoon Network for 5 seasons, and is still currently on Boomerang, right? Still being played. And he also teaches at LMU, and he's also done...
What's your point right now?
We'll talk about that soon.
So please welcome these guys, and thank you so much for coming. When I first brought this idea of bringing this panel together, and I brought it up to Long Beach Comic-Con themselves, one of the things they really wanted us to talk about, and something that these guys are very, very expert at, is to talk about the history of Filipinos and Filipino Americans in the comics and animation world. We'll actually get to their also individual things, individual endeavors. But right now, I wanted just to kind of open it up, and maybe Whilce, maybe you can talk a little bit about Filipino comics and how it sort of started, and maybe how it's evolved. How it started, like what was the first sort of venture of Filipino Americans into comics in the United States?
I believe it was done with Mangesto, with sila Nestor Redondo and Alex Pino and them guys. Basically, Tony was recognized by DC, and then DC, I guess Tony blabbed to them that there's more like us back home, and there basically was an exodus back here. So it was them. And then a lot of people then went into your guys' field. And then I guess I started out another venture by, I was in comics for about 16 years, and I went back to Manila in '95. And I opened up a studio. And of course I had to open it up on Volete Drive with the White Lady. There we had the new crop, Neil Yu, Philip Tan, and the guys. Those guys all came from my studio and stuff. But it seems, I guess, I don't know, maybe you guys might have more insight. Maybe it was the post-World War II years with American influence. We seem to be avaricious as a people in gobbling up ideas, language, you know. We're known around the world for being quote-unquote OFWs, overseas workers, going into another country and absorbing that culture, becoming part of that culture right away, absorbing the language. So I guess Alex Nino and them guys absorbed American comics right away, and did that. And it's very fortunate for us. I don't have any bad stories, so sorry, but the comics community is just such a small community, and the deadlines are just horrendous. I mean, every 4 weeks I got to complete something. I finish page 25 today, tomorrow, page 1. You guys know the grind. So when they find people that can actually do the work, it's we get gobbled up like that. And so I think periodically that's what happens with the Philippines in terms of comic books.
I can add to it because Nestor Redondo was actually my art mentor. And for about 6 months before he passed away when I moved down here to Los Angeles. And so what happened was back in the late 60s, I think, there was a guy named Orvi Jundis. He was a mailman, Filipino mailman, who actually helped bring some of these guys together. And Whilce was right about, it was Tony Di Zuniga, and then Mang Nestor brought people in, but they brought in a ton of Alfredo Alcala, and the big thing was the place that they went to actually gravitated towards was DC Comics, because DC was doing House of Mystery, House of Secrets, and they looked like the old EC Comics. In fact, the style was very close to a lot of Frank Frazetta and all these other great artists, Reed Crandall. And then what they did was what's interesting is during that point, my understanding is Bernie Wrightson started looking at these guys, and all these other people were looking at these Filipino artists, and initially they thought they're over-rendering, like their lines are too much and everything else, and it's starting to bleed on the page, but it started looking cool, and they got involved in Conan the Barbarian and all these other things, and so I've seen all the material like Mang Nestor and all these other Filipino artists, and they moved into animation. And I know you worked with Alex Nino, right?
I worked with Alex Nino when he was working on the Johnny Quest reboot. His office was right next door to mine. But I can't really add much to the comic thing. Everything I know, I regurgitate with Leo. Leo tells me stuff, and then I say all those things. So he's very knowledgeable in comic books. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just to add a little side. If you look overall in general at the Philippine community, the quote-unquote successful people, I mean, in all places, like sports, Manny Pacquiao, music, Gary Valenciano, billiards, Batang Reyes, us. It seems we have this thing that editors are attracted to. We're fearless. When we get our skill set, it's like we didn't even try to achieve it. It was just like something born into us. So when you ask us to do something, you ask us to do something in 3 weeks, we do it. You ask us to do something in 2 days, we do it. So Mang Nestor and all those guys, they could do everything like Leo was saying.
They're so fast. Like just the few months that I was with Nestor and all the other guys that came in, I couldn't believe, like a lot of my other friends who are artists, they're always struggling. Everything's really a big struggle. And one of the biggest things that I learned from Nestor was actually you have your your money shots, and you just replicate it. And a few years ago when I was a film exec, I was developing a lot of Jack Kirby properties. My writing partner is Tracy Kirby, who's Jack Kirby's granddaughter. So we were doing stuff with DC Comics and over at Warner Brothers, which they're doing everything now over there. But I had a chance to look at Jack Kirby's stuff, and it was the same thing. I always heard that they had their money shots. Like literally, they're just replicating because you don't have time. You literally don't have time. I think it was Neil Adams who told me this. Neil Adams and Jim Steranko, all those guys just kept saying, just copy it. You don't have time. You just take the great shots, reinvent them, and that's it. And so Filipinos are really good at that, at time management, creating on the fly, and the imagination, because we have people like, most people don't realize Steve Gann co-created Star-Lord, Filipino. Tony Di Zuniga, who we mentioned, he co-created Jonah Hex. Romeo Tangal was on the first inker on Teen Titans, the third version of Teen Titans with Marv Wolfman, with Cyborg. So all those guys
Who's
were
the Transformer?
I know. Not Danny Bullinati, but I know.
He was a math teacher too.
Yeah. There's a lot of different guys, and so and then of course you introduced me to Ronnie Del Carmen.
Oh, right.
Ronnie also co-directed Up. I mean Inside Out. He's over at Pixar. So look at our people: Apple Dap, Bruno Mars. All these directors are out there. So.
There was one of the typhoons that hit, and so Philip Tan calls me up and he says that there's a group in the Philippines and they want to do a charity thing. So basically the thing was, okay, get professional Filipino artists to do draw superheroes saving people, flood victims. So since I had the biggest network, I was in charge of getting people in. And so I went to DreamWorks, Louis Del Carmen, went through Pixar, Ronnie, and there's another guy there, Ricky Nierva, and Marvel, DC, Sony, everywhere. I had to turn down like 100 people because there were just so many of us. I mean, as I was doing the credits for everybody so that people could recognize these names, well, nobody knew the names, but they could recognize what we worked on. You could name anything that's in popular media, any movie, any animation, any game or anything. And there's not only, lead artists there, but managers, directors. We're all over the place.
I thought it was funny. I went to Pixar to visit Ronnie Del Carmen, and he gave me a Filipino tour of Pixar, pretty much. It's like when you got there, the person who checked you in was Filipino, and then you went to every Filipino person. But I went there for one of the typhoon relief. They did a charity event, and tons of people just painting stuff. Pete Docter painted this really beautiful Philippine. Pete Docter is the guy who won the Oscar for all the other Pixar stuff.
Oh.
Sure. But yeah, they're all there. It's amazing how many Filipinos.
Did Ronnie tell you what they called themselves?
They probably did. I forgot.
Pink Noise.
Big stories. Well, you got one of your mentees was Jay Oliva, right?
Jay, I don't know if Jay Oliva, he's the guy, I would like to say, he's the storyboard artist in all the DC movies right now. Like he did the storyboards for Superman.
All the Batman vs Superman.
He just finished up Justice League and everything.
He also directed the adaptation of Dark Knight Returns on the two of the best animated films. Dark Knight Returns, right? The adaptation. He directed that. He also directed Justice League Unlimited. He directed.
I think sit up here and talk about Filipino people again.
They're everywhere, literally everywhere. We're like everywhere you walk around. Like,
That's one of the things when I was thinking about this panel, it was interesting because I've talked many a time with Whilce. Whilce, and it's interesting when I listen to talking also with Leo, is I'm always constantly surprised by how many Filipinos are actually in these arts, because you just don't hear that. And I've been, a comic book nerd for my whole life. And so how many, just real quickly, like how many people even recognize some of these names that are being put out there? So you got homework, right? So go out and do some research on these guys. But what are the things too I wanted to talk about? So what are in those animation, in the animation world, Dan, you said there's plenty of people at Pixar, but what about Cartoon Network when you got Cartoon Network?
Well, when I was at Cartoon Network, I don't know if anyone's seen that movie, The Debut.
it's based on his life. Part of it. No, it's not. It's true.
It's based on my life. But you can watch it. It's kind of fun. Anyways, after watching that movie, I thought, wow, I never really embraced the Filipino side of me, I guess you can say. But after that movie, I was like, okay, I should do that more. The neat thing, the way I got to know Ryan Del Carmen was because of that movie. It's like, I had been a fan of his work, and he had been a fan of my work, and I got on Twitter, and I tweeted him like, hey, like your stuff, hey, I like your stuff too. He's like, hey, we should meet up. I'm gonna be in San Francisco. Hey, come up to Pixar. Okay. And I'm like, that's simple. Like, this is super cool. But the reason why we bonded was because it was his son that watched that movie that actually changed his son's life. Because up to that point, his son didn't know what he wanted to do. He didn't really see any Filipinos in the media. He didn't see anybody with any kind of drive or anything like that, pushing them into any kind of creative field. Saw that movie, he's like, oh my gosh, I can do whatever I want. And that's the problem that I found with a lot of Filipinos, is that we, as parents, as immigrants, as all those different things, we don't encourage our kids to go into the arts because it's not a very lucrative thing, one. Two, there's no roadmap to it. There's not very many Filipinos out there that you can look at and go, hey, they made it. How'd they do that? Maybe I can kind of forge a way that way. I never really, both me and Leo grew up knowing Ernie Reyes Jr. That's about as Filipino as we can
Ernie's grandmother was friends with our parents. And
we're like, oh my gosh, he came to like our parents. We're like, oh my gosh.
What is he doing over there? It's weird.
So, wasn't he like surf ninjas or something? But that's all that we knew, kind of thing, growing up. But the people that we knew who had made something of themselves were in comic books. They were the Athenians. So that was kind of the thing that kind of spurred us on to say, hey, these people have made it in this field. That's something that we can do, even though our parents didn't want us to go in that field, even though we wanted to go like into film and animation, all that other stuff. That was always kind of like our little, what should we call it, our North Star. All those guys.
But you were sticking Filipinos in, John Bravo.
Oh yeah, see,
give me those stories.
So I go like this. But there's a point. Yeah, so after I saw the debut, I was like, I gotta hire more Filipinos. And then I had to find Filipinos that were working in the industry. I hired, I think I had 3 Filipino artists, so that was good. I was like, okay, that was a good percentage of Filipino artists. And then Filipino voice people, I was like, I got Lea Salonga, she got to do a voice on the show. And Dante Bosco, because he was in the debut. I was like, hey, you kind of played me a little bit. Because I had never met him or anything like that. So that was
fun. And yours, what's great is that when we were reading comics and we're like, Whilce Portacio, I think he's Filipino. Like we looked at his artwork and like, I think he's Filipino and stuff like that. And so we're like, actually, you should talk about that. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I'm steering you around. I get all excited. So these stories.
I went, after being in the industry for a little while, I believe this is already image. I believe it, I needed a break. I mean, it's a grind, as you guys know. And so I went back to the Philippines for 2 months. I ended up staying there for 5 years, 95 to 2000. And that's when I set up the studio in the school, because I got there and there was this group called Alamat. And there were a bunch of indie guys, Bachitan, Jerry Alangilan, Gilbert Monsanto, and everybody. And they came up to my condo, and there were a bunch of guys that from UP and all these different universities, rich guys, lower class, middle class, and they all shared comics. So there were no societal barriers. They all just shared this love for something that couldn't happen in their eyes. And I remember them asking me to help them out, and I didn't know what to do. I was still young and dumb, and still trying to enjoy my life and trying to figure out where I was going to go. I wasn't even attached back then yet. And then Jerry comes up to me. Jerry Alangil, he's a great writer. He came up to me and he said, Will, did you know that when you came here, you sparked something? And I go, what? I'm just a kid here. I just draw funny things. And he said that, no, before you came here, we saw this Portacio but that's Spanish too. So some people thought that I was Spanish, but then with Whilce, which is the correct pronunciation of a non-name, some people pronounce it Whilce. So some people thought I was Italian. So he said that when I finally came to the Philippines, they finally realized that I really was Filipino. And not only was I Filipino, I was not that much older than them. And so it made their impossible dream possible. You know, in the Philippines we have a phrase, kung kaya ko, if I can do it, kaya mo, you can do it. And so by just, I mean, and it's not me, I mean, it could have been any one of us that went home and people recognized that we were Filipino. Just that connection that it's possible. Boom, we've got Linnell Yu. He's one of the most prolific natural artists in the world. Roy Alan Martinez, who is phenomenal and has this really dark brain. But again, it started this new wave just because it was possible. And that brought me back real quickly to my young age, and something me and Ronnie were talking about. When I was in high school in the 70s, dating myself, in Hawaii, I was like everybody else in high school looking for identity. And, right guys? You can't find it in movies, you can't find it in books, and then you do what you think is natural thing, ask your parents, and they say, that's the way it is. They won't tell you anything. You know, and so there was this void. So in my case, I had mostly Japanese friends at the time, so I became Japanese for a while. But I think that's part of what we as creatives should bond together for on the Filipino side. And Ronnie and I have talked about this a lot. We've got to give our kids heroes, something to strive for. Now we're in an abundance of possible heroes and role models, but nobody knows about it. Nobody knows it. I mean, you can even take it into other fields, science and everything. There's Filipino contributions all over the map, but we don't know.
It's fun. I don't know if anybody go to the Filipino Hollywood Bowl concert? Anyone? Isn't that awesome? At the Hollywood Bowl, Apple the App put together this concert of all the Filipino musical artists. And like at the Hollywood Bowl, seriously, you can fill that many seats of Filipinos? Yeah, people that I didn't know. I didn't know any of them. Actually, the biggest ones were, Black Eyed Peas. So Black Eyed Peas, because it was Apple the App. And Nicole Scherzinger.
Nicole Scherzinger.
Yeah, and it was hosted by Lou Davin Phillips and Vanessa Hudgens. And so it was just funny to hear her talk Filipino. Like, you don't really talk Filipino, you talk Tagalog. Yes, but it's cool because you're able to see that there are actually other Filipinos out there. I was in the animation for like a long time not knowing any other Filipinos. I'd see them, but I never really talked to them because I was still in that shame place. And then the other Filipino guys, they just came in, they weren't very sociable. I was a very sociable person, so I'd go meet people and be like, yeah, okay, it's fine, I have to finish. And whatever they're doing. It's like we weren't like collaborating or doing anything else. It was just a really silent kind of majority of Filipinos. They'd all meet together over in the corner, like when they were there.
About food.
Exactly. It's funny because Alex Nino would come in. He'd come in like way early in the morning because he lived in San Diego at the time. He'd come in like at 3 or 4 in the morning. Then he'd leave at 11 a.m. So
he was fast.
But yeah, he'd just go whoosh, and then he'd done. And you're like, he'd finish his work for Friday, or like on Wednesday. He'd just come in, just kind of lingering. Doing his thing. I remember just to escape his family.
I remember talking in. I would go over to Cartoon Network, and then I remember that was that one day. It was like, oh, you introduced me to Alex, and then we started talking. But it was weird. It's a weird vibe where he was when he was in Cartoon Network, because you see Al Tino and then just run across the hall, and I would go talk to Seth MacFarlane, and Seth would just like be this crazy energy, him and Butch and all those other guys, and they're but one thing I was going to take away from those guys is that there's a confidence and that a lot of these guys have. Like people, you know, we were growing up, they would tell us like, don't write, dance, sing, do everything. You know, it's like you can specialize on one thing. But it was crazy because all my friends, all the people I knew were white in the film industry, did multiple things. Everyone that I know who's gone on to do things. And it was interesting to see somebody like Seth, who was singing and then playing music, but then also drawing and everything that you can think of. But for us, they would always tell us, oh, one thing only, one thing at a time. I'm like, I don't understand what this. I'm over at YouTube Space. What's amazing over there is to see how many. So I think social media and which we're number one according, you know, in the world, the Philippines social media. But I noticed something with technology. You see these YouTubers, and a lot of them, a great number of them, are Filipinos. You know, like Guava Roy. You know, Guava Juice. I'm like, what? He got 8 million followers. All he does is fill up a bathtub and eat out of it. He's got 8 million followers. That's on one channel. The other channel, he's got 6 million. You know, and then his cousin, who's less famous, you know, Marlon, Filipino also, he's got 2 million. And he's the one trying to be an actor. Guava Roy's get all kinds of people. But that's the thing is for Filipinos, we have to be more proactive. We actually have the power to do, this time around, we have to say, oh no, I could do it all. Like Filipinos, you go to the Philippines, you ask them to do anything. You want to play guitar, play guitar. You want to code, I'll code. Like literally everybody knows how to do everything, and that's the advantage that Filipinos have. Because I notice, go ahead, say.
So I wanted to go back to what you were saying about earlier, about heroes. And let's specifically talk about a hero that you created, Bishop. So how did that go about? You're in a very unique position because you're an artist, but you're also a creator and a writer. And now you've created this beloved X-Men character. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you did that and how that came about?
Well, like everything else that you could ask all of us, it's fairly simple. It's not magic. If it was hard and if it was magic, it wouldn't happen. With our deadlines, it's got to happen like that. So we were starting out 2 X-Men books. Jim Lee was on one and I was on the other. Jim had Wolverine. And so upstairs goes, you got the original team, the real first class, okay? And they said, according to people upstairs, your team is underpowered, so you got 2 weeks to create another badass X-Men. And while I'm doing the current issue, which at the time was 281, so it was the first issue. And the only guidance I got was make sure everybody reacts to him. And so you can't second guess yourself, so I go, okay, so how do I do that? Okay, I got an ensemble, my team on the book. Okay, let me digest all my team members down to 1 or 2 lines, and let me figure out a personality that everybody will react to. Just a simple form. I mean, everything that you do has to be, that's the first thing. You've got to narrow it down to its simplest form and then just go ahead and do it. Don't second guess yourself. Don't ask for other people's opinions. You just got to go. There's no time. And so, okay, like for instance, you take Colossus. Colossus is a big, hulking, powerful guy, but he's a man boy. He's not very confident in himself, okay? So what if I had a new X-Men who was really big and hulking too, and he was very confident in himself? Okay, Colossus would feel insecure. Cool, that one's easy. Okay, like what about Cyclops? Cyclops is a born leader, but he hates to order people around. He knows exactly what to do, but he hates ordering people around. Okay, let me make a personality that's a born leader too, but he has no problems ordering people around. Again, I make it very simple, but that's exactly how it was. And so I created his character, and funny enough, it turned out to be a character, in my mind at least at the time, that seemed to be Filipino, everything that we're talking about. You know, just, hey, easy. So then I took it a step further. We're fashionistas. We just look at our tribal photographs. You know? we all didn't, you know, hunt down the boar and then skin him and, you know, put it together. I mean, there were just 5 million different fashionable styles back then in fashionable hair. So I go, okay, what if I found a guy who was very powerful like that, but unlike Wolverine, it wasn't a psychotic complex that made him need to kill or want to kill or make the possibility of killing. What if I created a character that had no problem killing, but it wasn't killing? So how do you do that? Well, context is everything. If he was in a nice, peaceful world, that's murder. But if he's in a war-torn world, like Days of Future Past, then it's surviving. So what if you had a character that was born into this world, and the only reason he's alive because he can survive? So to him, going up on the surface, fighting sentinels and stuff, and surviving to get back underground with everybody else, was just his job. That's how he felt, that it was just, I can do this, I just do this, I can do that. So the only thing that's important to him, and again, this is the Filipino in us, is to come back at the end of the day and say, where's the next party? You know, or, you know, where's my girlfriend? You know, just Filipinos are, in general sense, apolitical because the Spanish came, conquered, the Japanese came, conquered, Americans came twice, conquered. But see, the problem, but the thing was, we noticed, oh, they would come, they would oppress, and they would leave, and somebody else would come. So what's left? Family, relationships, you know, loved ones. So that's what we concentrated on. So that's what Bishop concentrates on. He concentrates on his life. And everything else, which everybody else thinks is really cool, to him that's just a job. And so again, that's just how easy it was to create that. And in our fields, it just has to be.
There are lines. Thank you for that, Kuya. And then Leo was telling me then that with Johnny Bravo's pretty much Filipino too, because he lived at home, right? Lived home with his mother.
Totally, yeah, because he's like this big blonde guy. No, yeah, he's very Filipino, I guess you can say, because he's more of, it's this tough thing that you kind of have to deal with, because growing up as guapo as I am, I was never like a ladies' man kind of person. I know, hard to believe. But it's that thing. I think that there's it's a kind of a Filipino thing to be very kind of shy, kind of not go take the bull by the horn. Like it happens. God, let it happen. I'm just gonna kind of ride the wave. If God permits, I'll do this thing. So it's a very passive thing. I was kind of a very passive person, except in my head. In my head, I was like, I can do that. I'm so much better looking than that guy, but he's getting girls. He's being a cool person. I was not a very cool person, still not. But I actually hung out with friends that were like that. So it was my observation of all them. It was pretty, so it's kind of like making fun of everybody else that's not me. But it's also the part of him that kind of is grounded in being Filipino is that want to be seen. I want to be noticed. I want people to recognize me, but I don't know how to do that kind of thing. And I think that's the whole Johnny, I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just he hides it within this big machismo comedic thing, and nothing phases him. And that's the Filipino part of him. The other part is just all like Elvis and all these other fun people that I totally love. It was based on all the things that I grew up with. Michael Jackson.
So it was interesting too, when you think about it, all those traits that you talk about, like you're a director now of your own show. You're basically the showrunner. So you're in this leadership.
Actually, not right now.
But I mean, for Johnny Bravo.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. We're going
how
back
does
a little
that?
bit.
Yeah, how did that work, and how did that, like, what were some of your unique experiences being the creator of this show?
Unique in the sense that I never thought of myself as being Filipino, as being disadvantaged, as being the person that's behind everybody else in competition kind of thing. Because I grew up here, because I grew up in America, because I grew up around a bunch of white friends, a bunch of people just that weren't Filipino. I didn't really take on that whole I am being oppressed, no one sees me or anything like that. I still felt different, so that all stuff was still there, but I never ventured into the whole I need some minority help or something like that. None of those things came into play until
Somebody pointed out.
until
It's that Steve Martin movie. You're not black.
Yeah, but growing up in the industry, it's kind of like John Bravo was my senior thesis project at Loyola Marymount University, and I sold it a couple months afterwards to Cartoon Network. So it's not like I took that route of I've got to try really hard and work my way up and stuff like that. They kind of plopped me right there in the you're in charge kind of seat, and it's not the funnest place to be in when you're not very sure of yourself to begin with. So you kind of have to sit there and pretend, and that's pretty much what we do. We pretend that we know what we're doing until we don't.
That's all animation and comic books. Like,
It's life, actually.
seriously, it is.
But you
It's-
realize that you do know what you're doing, and the more that you pretend, the more that you take on the persona of someone who knows what they're doing. And as long as you're asking questions, and as long as you're not stepping on people's toes in terms of like taking credit for stuff or taking other people's ideas and then claiming they're yours, all those different things. As long as you're being like a student, as long as you're continually learning, that's what was really neat about being in Hanna-Barbera. They told me this is going to be your graduate school. I was like, okay, cool. I can treat this like graduate school. I still feel like I'm like 50 years of graduate school. But that's what I'm continually doing. Once I got into the industry, I just continually ask questions. I continually learn. Like, I'm still a director, but I'm still learning from other people. It's like trying to find, you always want to find your peers, find out how they do it, what's going on with them, and kind of like take that role upon yourself and empower yourself to do what you're supposed to be doing.
Oh, Ron, can I jump in? It's interesting because we all we have groups. The biggest thing that you guys have to do, or actually continuously we all have to do, is actually stay within our group. You have a community. Well, with Whilce, he had, you were, like, Jim Lee was stealing from you. I mean, he's not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like, oh, you see his artwork, and then you see Jim's art is starting to morph into this a lot of the Whilce's art. Literally, if you see modern day comic books, is I have to say, came from Whilce, because everyone was stealing from his style, his art style. We were looking at his copying and tracing all that stuff. But we all have it, and Dan had, in his group, there was guys like Seth MacFarlane, Butch Hartman, and Steve Marmel. I had a really great group of my group of friends. We actually had contributed this book right here, the Behind the Screen on faith and film. And I actually, in this Mummy comic book that I had published with had done in Universal, there's a group of guys that I used to meet once a month for about a year and a half. It was guys like Scott Derrickson. My friend Scott directed Doctor Strange. I had another friend, Todd Komarnicki, who produced Elf, and he wrote Sully. My other friend, David White, had created this thing called Pureflix. They did this Christian movie thing, God Is Not Dead. And then we had another friend, Jim Kruger, he wrote Earth X. That was our community of people. And so what you guys have to do is you have to be around people that are better than you. Like when I was around Nestor and all the monos, you'd sit there and you go, no one's telling you, no one's saying don't do this. You know how you get around with people and you go, oh, they're always like criticizing you. These guys would come in, you just have to like up your game. you have to just be, you know, nobody criticizes you. You just have to feel like you have to be better. And so be around those kinds of people that are more positive and get around these communities, because it's going to really help you.
So I'm gonna have 2 more questions, and then I want to open up for Q&A. So one other question I had for everyone on the panel is, what are you working on now? What are you doing? And it's sort of a 2-parter. Are there ways that you're trying to interject Filipino culture into any of your current projects?
Sure. I am currently directing on a show called Pete the Cat. I don't know if you all set. It is based on the best-selling book by James Dean. I don't know if you have kids. If anyone has kids here, Pete the Cat, cute little book. Very cool. I'm directing the pilot. That should premiere on Amazon on December 26th. And then I'm working on another pilot with this other girl over at Amazon, which was really cool. I don't know how many of you are students who just draw or anything like that, or enter art competitions. This girl, she just graduated from Cal State, I want to say Fullerton. Graduated from Cal State Fullerton. She put together this fun art portfolio. She went out and did this art show. Her show was like, she did this little piece of artwork that were really, really tiny. And she did these paintings, so when you went over to her section, you had to take a magnifying glass and look at stuff. And one of the executives saw that and goes, "Oh my gosh, I want to develop that into a show." And basically, I'm working on that, and I think that's pretty amazing. This girl was just in college. She put her stuff out there for anybody to see. So the Amazon executives came by and saw it, and so now a couple of us are surrounding her and trying to figure out how to make that into a pilot. That's what I'm doing right now.
So the last couple of years, I've been doing screenwriting. I've been doing a lot of consulting, and then also ghostwriting, and then rewrites, and then the last 3 films I actually got credit on. So I've transitioned in that, and one of the things is that I've gone back to creating my own material, just because I've also been an adjunct professor over at Regent University, and also at Act One here in Los Angeles. And I noticed, like, I would tell them, like, I would tell students, like, hey, create your own stuff. And I teach writing comic books for film and television, because I was a film exec at one point. And I was developing a lot of, comic books to, for films. And like Dwayne McDuffie was one of the guys I was working. We were doing Damage Control years ago, but it was over at Warner Brothers, and then it ended up back at Marvel. So what was interesting is the last couple of years, I noticed, like, a lot of my students would actually take my advice. And so, I had, Libby Fritz, who was one of my students, who was like writing on turn. And then I had a couple of girls, Sarah Hines and Maggie Hart, had done their own movie. Like, literally, they did indie film, and they all of a sudden they do these webisode series. And I thought, well, I should go back to my roots and actually just create my own comic books and get into directing. So I'm working on a film right now, putting together people on it, and then and also doing my music stuff, going back, because while on the debut, the guys who classified records, I used to be involved with them as an artist as well too. So I'm getting back to doing music. So literally, just creating is the big thing. But integrating, because right now it's all about transmedia. So if you can create material that's both comic books and film and animation, and it can be told in multiple stories and platforms, and that's what people want to see. So
very, very cool. How about you, Whilce? What's new and exciting?
Next year I'm relaunching, well, not relaunching, it's going to be volume 2 of something called Stone. It's a book I did a while ago of Image, and it basically is I wanted to create a world using a lot of our mythological creatures, so Mananangals and Tigbalans and stuff. And so I created with a very simple concept. Back in a while ago, action stars were the big thing, and over here, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and such. And back home, it was FPJ, it was, all these guys back there. And so the concept was, what if I had an action star who was famous for filming a franchise, which basically was kind of like a street fighter, where contestants would battle each other, and they each had these powerful Agimat gems, which gave them different various powers. And so if the loser, when he dies, his Agimats go to the winner and enhances or merges or mixes with new persons, right? So anyways, the concept was, what if this action star was filming his latest movie for the franchise in the skating rink at Mega Mall at the time, and he's getting suited up with his Agimats on his arms, and the stuntman was getting suited up too, and all of a sudden, a real Tikbalan comes out with real Agimat power gems. And this whole thing is actually real. And the Agimats this guy is wearing actually are not star props, they're actually real. So the rest of the book is him basically trying to survive and being chased by all the other champions. And of course all the other champions were Tikbalans and Mananagal, so I could do my take on that. Well, that went for a while, and what was kind of interesting there, it was my first introduction into what it was really like to be in the Philippines, because a buddy of mine, a Guatemalan Jewish guy who was who looked like your typical middle-aged terrorist. Whenever we travel, he always gets stopped by for 3 hours at immigration. But he owned Hit Studios, which was the second largest recording studio over there. And one of his partners was Dennis, and Dennis's brother, this is how the Philippines is, connections. Dennis's brother was the president of Sony Philippines. And he needed a franchise to pitch to the big boss guy every year. And he goes, oh, Stone's pretty cool. And so with the launch of Stone, the first issue, I get a Sony recording, CD album. And I was able to pick throughout the whole CD catalog, the whole Sony music catalog. There are a lot of names that everybody knows, but the most famous story that nobody knows about that thing is that I heard this. They gave me they sent me these songs, and if I liked it, I said yes, and then they would get the paperwork done to get it done. And so I listened to this one song and go, oh, that's pretty cool. It's pretty catchy. Let's take that. And then right when they were doing the paperwork, the song hit in Europe. Well, that was Rockefeller Skank by Fatboy Slim. So that was a quality of that, and of the stars that we were getting. But the point is that here we were doing a Stone Philippine-centric comic book, and for Image. And when it launched out, it was the #1 independent comic book here in the U.S. And so it's been a while since I got back to that. And I want to go back to that because I've been going back to the Philippines for a while, for a couple of years now, and all the connections are starting to get there. And as we were talking about a little bit earlier before this, the quality and the level of professional entertainment back there, the directors, the grips, the lighting people, the actors, everything, the musicians, everywhere, is up to a level, but they don't really have stories to play around with, to really showcase what they can do. So I'm going to relaunch Stone next year, and I'm already in talks with a lot of people there to do exactly what you're talking about there with transmedia. I've got now best friends with musicians, best friends with movie directors, producers, animation, advertising. And hopefully if I can get all the pieces together right, what I want to do is I want to launch Stone exclusively for the Philippines for the first year, but use a full transmedia launch, full board everywhere with music, radio,
animation,
everything. I
From
mean,
the
even
director of Johnny Bravo.
right, and for the guys who watch the fight stuff, if any of you guys know Brandon Navera, I was just in Manila last week for a convention, APCC, and Brandon, I've known Brandon for a little while, and Brandon came up to me and his choreographer right now, Sonny Cison, who used to manage the Power Rangers, and Brandon wants to be Stone, so we'll see what happens.
Very, very cool. Are there any questions from the audience? We can use this mic here. We can just pass it around.
I don't need a mic, but you talk about like trying to foster talent that's up and coming. So with regards to comics, I read a lot, but I can't read everything. Are there any Filipinos that are in the big two, either writers or artists, or even some of the independents like Image?
Francis Manukau.
Yeah.
Francis Manukau.
Flash.
Yeah, Flash and Trinity. He's pretty badass. He's pretty amazing.
And he's one of the full artists. I mean, he even watercolor paints his stuff.
Yeah. And he's also a television personality. He does everything. He was on History Channel. He did he's a host. He's a writer. He's an artist. Yeah. He's one of those guys.
There are quite a few people now. I mean, as we mentioned, with all of the companies. You can probably just Google it, but let me give you an example of somebody just to show you the diversity and what we were talking about, the fearlessness. I can't name him because of a particular part of his job description, which again is vast, as we were talking about. I met him years ago as a comic book artist, very good comic book artist, and he did Conan type centric stuff. I find out later on he actually is a concept guy. So he was one of the team that worked on the second phase of the Disney Warlords.
Raphael? Oh, sorry.
You didn't get his last name, so we're still cool. Okay. So I learned he's a concept guy, right? Then I learned he's a fight choreographer. And he's part of the team with Shimada, with the Born Legacy, Then I find out the reason he's a choreographer is because he's a martial artist. Well, Arnie's comes in. Then I find out he's classified in the U.S. for bladed weapons. Then I find out that he's a trainer of bladed weapons. Then I find out, which is the top secret part, he's a trainer for Team 6, SEAL Team 6. So here you got a Filipino that, in my opinion, in my next military book, I'm not going to be writing about operators, because operators have rules of engagement. Military guys have to follow rules. So that's why they get trained by civilians who don't have to follow rules and therefore can go out there and figure out the new techniques and merge with the new arts that are coming up. And this guy is one, so for me, this guy is much more deadlier than a military
He's
operator.
pretty amazing.
And he's a nice guy. And he's a nice guy. Nice, quiet guy. I was going to say where he was from, but...
Yeah.
I think we have
Google that.
time for one more question. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
So I'm really excited to hear that there are a lot of Filipinos behind the scenes and developing characters, and I'm really excited about Vision. In my world, we're super excited about Black Panther coming on. So when will we see a Filipino hero? When will we see, how far are we from seeing that in mainstream?
Well, what's interesting is, so one of the versions of Steel, DC Comics, is Filipino. And most people don't realize that. So what's interesting is that there are, they've got to use, the big thing for DC, for example, DC Comics and Marvel Comics, they're both, Disney and Warner Brothers are launching their big streaming services. And people are always, I just had this conversation where they were wondering, why are you doing 3 Joker movies? Why are you doing this? It's like, because you have to populate that streaming service. If there's only Titans and Young Justice. No one's going to pay for it, but they're going to see this entire catalog of Marvel and DC, and so if people understand now what's happening now is that we've got to expand the characters, right? Because China, that's why DC Comics created Chinese Superman and Chinese Batman and all these other, because there's legacy characters that are happening. You're going to see, that's why Jason Momoa is Aquaman, directed by an Asian. Well, I mean he's from Australia, but he's Korean. But you see, so we're probably close to it. It's starting to happen. We're still behind overall as Asians right now. I think Asian women are getting more roles, but at the same time, it's up to us to create material. Again, whether you're, I had this conversation with my friend Kevin Grevious, he created Underworld, and he's always about make our own stuff. Just create our own stuff. You have to create your own stuff, but make it so that they are characters that are in the universal landscape. Don't make them in a ghetto, quote, a ghettoized version. I'm strictly in the Philippines. I'm saving the Philippines. Make them just all you have to do is take Justice League and put a Filipino in the front. That's it.
Nice.
Right? That's it. Then that's all you have. Right? That's what. It's as simple as that. Make a Johnny Bravo, but then all of a sudden, I'm sure you're going to reinvent it.
Thank you very much. So we're really out of time. We have one more thing. So I want to just thank Van Partible, Leo Partible, and Whilce Portacio for being on the panel. We're going to get creative. Thank you all for being here. We're going to give them gifts. We have some little gift bags for them. And if you guys want to know a little bit more about Phil Creative, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as Phil Creative. We do a lot of panels like this. And we're also really, really pushing to do what these guys are saying, trying to encourage each other to really create and tell our own stories. So thank you guys so much for coming. You guys have a great day.